So the day that I'm recording this video is December 29th of 2023, but the day that you're going to be watching it is actually December 30th, which is the final Saturday of the final week of the year. So this will be my final video for 2023. And I thought long and hard about what my last topic should be, and I obviously had to come back to my favorite topic because I've always got things bouncing around in my brain surrounding this topic, and that, of course, is Metroid. Of course, in a world where we have no concrete information or updates about the status of Metroid as a franchise or Metroid Prime 4, all we can ever do is speculate, or, like I'm doing today, have kind of a larger general discussion around the status of the franchise and just kind of spitball some ideas that are bouncing around, like I said, in my own brain as somebody who is a massive Metroid fan and incredibly excited for Metroid Prime 4. So the general conceit of today's conversation has to do with how important it is for Metroid Prime 4 to not only be good, but for it to be a success for the future sake of the franchise. Of course, I want to again say thank you and welcome to all of the new subscribers that have been jumping on the channel over the past 2 weeks. It's been fantastic growth, which I'm very appreciative of. I'm currently making a push to try to cross 25,000 subscribers, hopefully sometime in the next couple of months. So if you're new to the channel or you watch and have not been subscribed, then I hope you consider subscribing after watching this video. So, Metroid Prime 4, last video of the year. We're coming back to this game because we still know nothing about it, which is very tragic. Of course, my most hyped and anticipated game on all of planet Earth right now. And naturally, a lot of this conversation is predicated on, I think, the general thought and theory that most of us have that the game will probably almost definitely be shown to us next year in 2024. And I also think 2024 will most likely be the year that it releases as well. So I'm really thinking come this time next year, we will all have played Metroid Prime 4. Now, like I said, the topic at hand surrounding Metroid Prime 4 is exactly how important it is for the game to be quality and also to be a sales success for the state of Metroid because, as I'm sure most of us know, Metroid, while being long-running, very famous, one of the most important franchises in the industry, and while being a franchise known for its extremely high quality, it is not a franchise that has traditionally been a very big seller. Only a handful of titles have crossed 2 million sales. Only one of them has crossed 3 million sales, which, thank goodness, is the most recent new game, Metroid Dread, on the Nintendo Switch. And, you know, again, even only a few have crossed 1 million. It's a very unique situation that the franchise finds itself in, being so beloved, being one of the staples of the industry, going back to the 8-bit days with the NES, when the NES revived the dying game industry, and still being something that doesn't really sell to the wide audience. And part of that is attributed to Japan because it's not a franchise that sells very well in Japan for some reason, which I certainly don't understand. But whatever the reason, it's just not a high-selling franchise, even though we all love it. And so when I look at Metroid Prime 4 and what I expect to happen, the good news is I am extremely confident in the game. I think that Nintendo and Retro knows what they're doing. The fact that Nintendo was able to identify that things just weren't coming together properly with that original version, and they scrapped it and rebooted it with Retro Studios in 2019. To me, that showed me that they were willing to spare no expense on the game, and that they were willing to do whatever it takes to make sure it's the game it deserves to be. They're making sure the game will deliver, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, that gave me total confidence in the game. I don't care how silent it's been for the last 5 to 7 years. That doesn't matter to me. I mean, I'm sad about it, I'll say, because I want the game, but what it doesn't do is make me concerned about the state of the game. I know a lot of people take the silence away as a negative, and they think that it's in development hell behind the scenes. Some people think that it could be a sign that the game is canceled, which I think is just ridiculous and absolutely not the case, but it is what it is. However, like I said, to me, it's always made me more confident in the game. So if we just explore, for the sake of discussion, the scenario where Metroid Prime 4 releases, whether it's next year or 2025 or whenever it releases, it comes out and it's either a mediocre game or it's a game that just doesn't sell all that well. Maybe it can barely crack 1 million or 1.5 million in sales, you know, selling less than Metroid Dread, selling less than the original Metroid Prime on the GameCube in 2002, potentially even selling less than the Metroid Prime Remaster that came out earlier this year. If it's not a huge hit commercially, what will that do to the franchise? Well, I think you'd be forgiven for thinking that it could maybe kill the franchise. And before Metroid Dread released, I might have also agreed with that. thinking that if Metroid Prime 4 wasn't a big hit, maybe it would do serious, irreparable damage to the franchise. However, I think Metroid Dread really does represent a bit of a saving grace, and I think that it showed Nintendo and the larger gaming community that a good Metroid game on a popular console, right, so we need the install base to support it, a good Metroid game will do well. Metroid Dread selling over 3 million copies, and only like it only took a year to do so and to become the best-selling Metroid game. That's a huge testament to the quality of the game and the popularity of the franchise. And yes, it is aided by the install base of the Switch, absolutely, but it doesn't mean that there isn't value in seeing how well that game performed. And the fact that it was reviewed so well, nominated for Game of the Year, won Best Action Game, 3 million in sales, that showed me that we are in a Metroid renaissance. I think it reinvigorated the franchise. I think it reinvigorated the gamers' interest, gaming community's interest in Metroid. And it also definitely introduced a ton of new players to the franchise, which also happened even then, again, when Metroid Prime Remastered came out. Trust me, as somebody who has a channel that is 50% based around the Metroid franchise and Metroid content, I hear from a lot of people on their opinions and experiences on the Metroid franchise, going back to the original game to the most recent game. And I heard from so many people during the releases of Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime Remastered that those games were their first Metroid game, and it made them a fan, and now they're excited for what's next. So I think that in the aftermath of Metroid Dread and then also Prime Remastered, we have more Metroid fans than there has ever been. And so I think that will actually help make Metroid Prime 4 an even bigger success. But even if something weird happens that does prevent Prime 4 from being a big success, I still think that the overall release and reception to Dread alone has done a lot in terms of goodwill for the franchise, and I think Nintendo will always keep the Metroid franchise rolling because of what that game achieved. Now, beyond that, we can't forget another very important aspect to this, which is there is a phenomenal chance, if not almost a guarantee, that Nintendo is already working on the next Metroid game that will release after Metroid Prime 4 anyways. Metroid Dread was so incredibly successful, as we've discussed, being the best-selling Metroid game of all time, and only taking a year to do so. Mercury Steam clearly has a good relationship. They've now made 2 Metroid games for Nintendo, one on the 3DS with Samus Returns and now Metroid Dread, and there's been discussions and rumors about them already working on the next 2D Metroid game. Now, to be fair, whether or not Mercury Steam is actually working on the next game, and if there's any truth to those rumors, we don't know that. But I think that when we take a step back and just look at the larger picture, there is no reason to think that Nintendo isn't already working on or planning on the next 2D Metroid game. So we've got Metroid Dread that came out on the Switch, huge hit, best-selling game. Prime Remastered has come out, done very well. Prime 4 next on the docket, and then in theory, they're already ready to release Metroid 6 or the next 2D Metroid experience, or whatever the case may be, sometime after the release of Metroid Prime 4, which means it kind of, if you think about it, just adds more to the general concept I'm talking about, where even if something nutty happens and Prime 4 isn't a huge sales success, they're probably already going to be releasing another game anyway, so hopefully that game would have a chance to undo any potential sales damage Prime 4 would do in this weird made-up scenario where Prime 4 doesn't actually sell well. Now, I still want to revisit and drive home this point, the fact that I expect Metroid Prime 4 to be a great game, and I expect it to be successful. Even if, at the worst, it sells 3 million units also and just matches Metroid Dread, that'll still be a success, I think. But I think that because of the excitement around the Switch 2, which I expect it to release on, the success of Metroid Dread, the success of Prime Remastered, the old school Metroid fans like myself, and all of the new Metroid fans that have hopped on board in the Switch era because of those 2 games, I think that those factors will make Metroid Prime 4 a big hit. And again, like I said, on top of also being a great game, because it does help if your game is good when you want to look at commercial success and sales success. Very rarely does a bad game sell very well. Sadly, it is common for a great game to not sell well, so there's clearly a problem in the industry and a disconnect in that direction. But it is pretty rare for a game that's notoriously shitty to have really good sales. And so luckily, that's why I think the game is just going to do well across the board. So it's an interesting thing to analyze, right? What's going to happen with Prime 4? Will it sell well? Will it not sell well? Will people rally around the franchise? Will it become the best-selling Metroid title ever? I certainly think so. I mean, I'm basing this off of very little information because we don't know if it's releasing on Switch or next gen or both. But when I just think like holistically, as a very early prediction before we've seen the game, just for fun as a Metroid fan, I feel like 5 million is a pretty solid target given the hype for the game, the success of the last two games, like I said, and if there is next-gen hype added on to that in any way, shape, or form, I feel like it's got a pretty good target of being the best-selling Metroid game ever, you know, and that's exciting, and that's only going to aid in the franchise being around forever. And so, you know, to kind of dial this down to the main thesis statement of this video, how much of the future of the franchise is riding on Metroid Prime 4. I do think that some of it is. I think it will definitely hurt the franchise and hurt Nintendo's view of the franchise if all of this time and effort and money and development goes into Metroid Prime 4 and it turns out to not really be a sales success. It's going to hurt. But I actually don't really think it'll be the death knell for the franchise like I thought might have been the case before Metroid Dread. It really comes back to Metroid Dread, man. That was a game-changing moment. I mean, not just because it was great, not just because it was a sequel to Fusion, not just because Dread was gestating behind the scenes at Nintendo for almost 20 years before finally releasing, but because the game was so good and so well received and sold so well. So I think that that has given a lot of new life and breath for the franchise. And so even a game coming out that maybe doesn't land like they expected to, in a world where that was Prime 4, I still think Nintendo's committed to Samus and to the franchise. They know it's popular, and I kind of see Metroid as a franchise that, how would I say this? Maybe Nintendo views it as almost a goodwill franchise, that it's goodwill to the community and the Nintendo fan base and the industry to keep making Metroid games and supporting it, even if it's maybe not the highest selling franchise. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm hoping they see value in it, at least in that sense. And I think they do, and Dread helped with that. So this is what I think. It's all speculation, man. What can we say now when we haven't seen the game, and we don't know what platforms it's going to release on, and we don't know how good it's going to be? But, you know, it's my last video for the year. I wanted to come back and talk about Metroid because it's my favorite thing, and this is all we have to go on because it's still a mystery. But Metroid fans like myself, we have plenty of things to talk about, even with a game like this that's basically invisible to us, because we're thinking about it and theorizing about it and just imagining what it's going to be like when we finally see it for the first time, and beyond that, when we finally play it for the first time. So this is what I think. Share your thoughts below. Thank you guys for coming along this journey with me on YouTube again for this past year for 2023. I hope you have a happy, fun, and safe New Year's Eve. I'm looking forward to my own. And barring a surprise video that I have to make because of a crazy story, I will instead see you guys next year. Bye-bye.